Okay, welcome back to our readings on Baudrillard, and we're talking today about how the simulacrum is actually installed in our real world. And he says right here that Disneyland is a perfect model of entangled orders of simulacra. So in Disneyland there are different simulacra coming together, and here it is especially the entanglement of different illusions, pirates, frontiers, the future world, etc. And it creates a imaginary world, and this imaginary world is basically its essence. Nevertheless, the really important idea comes a little bit later, and that is when he says that this Disneyland exists in order to hide that it is the real country and all of real America that is Disneyland. So Disneyland only exists to distract us from the fact that we actually already live in Disneyland. So he asks, what is it actually that makes that kind of concentration camp of people so magnetic? Why are so many people flowing into this order? And he says inside a whole panoply of gadgets magnetizes the crowd in directed flows. Outside, solitude is directed at a single gadget, the automobile. So that does not answer the question that I just asked. But yeah, it's interesting to observe it from a higher perspective and to see somehow inside there are flows that are directed, flows of people that go in certain directions. And then we have just a desert of cars that is parked in the parking lot in front of Disneyland. And the question is, why does our modernity look like that? And he says, this is actually the profile of America. So we have a surface level where we manufacture dreams and sell these dreams to everyone. And I think this nowadays becomes more and more the vision of the world. We establish like all these TikTok channels where we live in this imaginary self-referential world where we don't see what is beneath the surface, what is going on below the surface. He also uses here the interesting word, it pacifies. It pacifies, it makes us more like pacifists, but it also makes us passive. In a certain kind of activity, of course. And he doesn't want to like analyze the ideology that is behind Disneyland directly. This would be a simple Marxist critique, and we would say something like, yeah, you know, everywhere is this consumer society, models are exploited, all these influences. No, he says this masks something else, like even the criticism, and you see that a lot on YouTube, where people criticize our society, where people criticize other YouTubers and so on and so forth. But this actually masks something else. And it is, as he says here, an ideological blanket that functions as a cover for a simulation of the third order. And this is already the thought that I said. Disneyland exists to distract us that we live in the real Disneyland. So, and I believe that even when we have ideological critique, we see people don't get poor anymore from ideological critique. So ideological critique, to a certain sense, becomes self-referential. You have to be critical. You have to, don't believe. You have to be critical. There's a pizza connection in Washington. You know about it? Be critical, right? Nobody's critical of critical thinking anymore. Critical thinking became the perfect ideological blanket to mask the underlying problems that we have. That, of course, I don't know specifically. It's a ghost-like reality. It is there and it is not there. The functions of society are not present to us. And we distract ourselves by entertainment products that now come off as critique. Baudrillard does not talk about that yet. But I think Baudrillard is always on the verge to dive deeper on these issues. It's not just like a criticism where we say, and therefore we need to change capitalism and we have to have more socialism. No, it tries to dive into the existential nature of human illusion. So, and what all of that conceals, especially in the case of Disneyland, is that the real is no longer real. And I think this is also the case of the internet. The internet just assures us that the real is no longer real. The criticism in the internet, sorry, I said assures us, it conceals the fact that the real is no longer real. Yeah, and this is very interesting because it's an infantilization, an infantile degeneration, and I'm not necessarily opposed to it. It can be nice to live in a childlike world from time to time, but see, when we take Saint-Exupéry and we think about The Little Prince, right, we find a lot of people who say, you only see good, you use your heart. You have to become a child again to see the things as they are truly. And maybe there's a certain truth to it, but Disneyland utilizes this childlike fantasy of good and evil, and that you see with your heart instead with your intellect. It distracts you, it lures you into the world where Occam's razor rules. The simplest theory of the society wins. And of course, we now criticize that, and of course we also react to that issue. And we build a little bit more self-critical childhood fantasies nowadays. We notice that self-criticism, self-irony are also things that we can sell well. So, and what is the characteristic of all of these instances? It is the energy of the real to a city whose mystery is precisely that of no longer being anything but a network of incessant unreal circulation, a city of incredible proportions without space, without dimension. So the contact to the real is lost. I mean, while I really wonder what is the real, maybe we cannot approach it, but we don't even have that in mind anymore. An empirical reality, for example, that can still be constructed. We get lost in the American pragmatic tradition that is certain kind of anti-realism. So, and I'm against metaphysical realisms where we just presuppose a realism, but now we just replace these metaphysical realisms with endless circulation, the endless production of products, and the endless entertainment in a self-referential circle. YouTubers react to contents that others have reacted to. They react to reactions, and 10 years later they react to their reactions of their reactions. It is a sympathetic nervous system made of childhood signals and fake phantasms. That's what Disneyland is. And YouTube is a nervous system that is nervous about itself. Back to Disneyland, it is a space of the regeneration of the imaginary as waste treatment plants are elsewhere and even here. It is the ideological resource that fuels our society. It gives the energy to go to work, to live the life that is not real anymore. Of course, that's a bit simple in its in the way I phrase it. It's not, of course, it's not on a level of Baudrillard, but I think what he even wants to say more than that is that our society turns into the production of the unreal. So while some people produce energy that is necessary for us to survive in an order of the real that deals with our existential situation, there are also more and more people who just provide energy for the dream factory, who just produce dreams on YouTube, who say, be yourself and become a YouTuber. They no longer touch each other, but this is so, and he thinks that our society does that on all levels, right? So he thinks we copy our original functions and we develop a new function for that we then can endlessly produce, right? We recycle dreams. That's what he says here. On a mental level, Disneyland is a prototype for these new functions that we invent, right? So he says, but all the sexual, psychic, somatic recycling institutes which proliferate in California belong to the same order. But we have that now everywhere in the world. And he says, okay, let's give different examples. People no longer look at each other, but now we invent institutions where people look at you, right? We no longer walk. Walking is not a real activity anymore. Now we have to go jogging, right? It's an invention of a new kind of activity that serves a certain purpose in a self-referential society. And he says, yeah, so everywhere we lose the contact of the real to the real, and we invent something else. The metaverse may be something like that. It is, in that sense, not an evolution, but an involution, where we just develop with regard to each other. And this may be a ceaseless process of developing our things without real results. It's a strange state in which we started to live. That's his criticism. Yeah, and it really asks, what is the purpose of reality? Do we live in these distracting YouTube universes still with regard to our real potential? Live up to your real potential, and motivational speech follows. If you don't want to hear the motivational speech, then like, share, and subscribe, and close the video. Other than that, join this channel if you want to read such complicated texts. I will do more Baudrillard in the future. I also have still Badiou on the list. I have Kurzweil on the list. Hegel is always there on the list. So join this channel. Give me comments if I understand something wrong. If I'm too naive here and if I should dive deeper, I'm interested in that. Please let me know. Thanks for watching. Live long. Refer to yourself and prosper.